Hey guys, my name is Anthony, and in today's video I'm going to be talking over an event that we did with Team Shazoo, a social event where a bunch of us, some of the quickest guys on Xbox, we all got in some classic cars and we did some racing around a few tracks. So if you want to see more sort of highlights similar to this from social events and stuff like that, then make sure to hit the like button because it will let me know that you guys are enjoying this type of content, and obviously it will help push out to other people as well. So coming into this one, I wasn't really sure how I was going to do because I don't usually use the classic cars at all for any reason, and combined with the fact that there are some very quick people in this lobby, I wasn't really sure how I was going to do for this one, but I wanted to just try my best and see how it goes. So for this one, we were allowed to use setups, which in my personal opinion, I would have rather it been fixed setups so that everyone had the same chance, but you know, it's not ran by me, it's ran by the team, so they get to choose exactly how this operates. And they said you were allowed setups, you weren't allowed to use ABS. So for those who usually do use ABS, if there were anyone in this lobby doing that, then obviously it would have been a big disadvantage to them. But yeah, as you can see, we're putting in some pretty decent laps here. My PB going into this was a 1:03, so I really wanted to try and get as close to that, or even try and beat that if possible, because I knew that there was going to be some people who were potentially even going to get into the 59s, which eventually did happen. As you can see, LCR Leopard got into the 59s, and this was actually our quickest lap of the session. As you can see, we break going into turn 1, and there is a car ahead of us. I don't know if he knew we were on a lap, but he sort of distracted me, but luckily we managed to get a pretty decent exit off of turn 3, which allowed us to carry all of that speed going down this next straight. So we ended up gaining about a tenth, maybe a tenth and a half by the time we got to the next braking zone, which is obviously quite good. But because of him distracting me, I knew that there was still some time in this lap, so I definitely wanted to go again if possible. But as I said, this was our quickest lap, so we did go for extra runs, but we ended up invalidating them, or we ended up just messing them up at some point in the lap. So you can see we go purple in sector 2. Not really 100% sure about that. The game does tend to lie when it comes to that. It will say you've gone purple in a sector when you really haven't. But as we cross the line, we do a 1 minute 0.5, which at the time puts us right behind TRO Limitless. But by the time the qualifying had ended, we had ended up in 10th place. So once again, similarly to the previous event we did with Shazoo, we're starting from P10, and as you can see from the strategy, these are the classic cars. It's the F2004 Ferrari, and there was only one compound of tyres that you could really use at that time, so it was just the dry tyres. So we've got 4 lights, 5 lights, and away we go. We get a pretty decent exit actually. As you can see, Florian ahead of us didn't really get the best of exits, and Langman got a pretty decent exit himself, so we are still in P10, but as we brake, we so close to damaging our wing from Langman, but luckily we didn't, and we kind of get stuck on everybody there, but luckily we managed to get through it somehow, and we're now in P8, so we've gained 2 positions overall from that start. So now we're behind our teammate in the actual Team Shazoo, Ewan, who is a very talented driver. He's actually one of the drivers competing in the F1 Esports Challenges, so if that doesn't prove how talented Ewan is, then obviously I don't know what will. But yeah, the Ferrari is a different beast in itself, I have to say. Driving this car is completely different to driving the regular cars, as it should be, but I was surprised by how different it actually was to drive. Some of the fundamentals that you will pick up when driving the regular cars, you sort of have to actually disregard those when driving this car, because this car is completely different. If you guys didn't know, these cars had built-in traction control, I believe. So the way that these cars are sort of coded into the game is it sort of has built-in traction control. At the same time, you can still lose the rear, so it's a little bit confusing, but you can't just plant the foot down and just get traction straight away. However, you can't exactly be as smooth as you are with the F1 2020 cars, or else you're going to lose a bunch of time. So with this one, you can be a little bit more aggressive with the throttle, and that, you know, it does kind of mess you up a little bit, especially when you're used to driving a certain way. And when it comes to the brakes as well, it's even worse, because you have to brake completely differently. Instead of braking and spamming down the gears, you've got to brake, wait a little bit, and then slowly go down the gears, or else your rear tires are going to lock up and you're going to spin. But moving on to actually what's going on now. And as you can see, Ewan ahead of us is locking up quite a lot. There was a battle between the 3 guys ahead of me right there. So I sort of wanted to try my best to get through those 3 guys as quickly as I can, so that I wasn't losing time to the guys ahead from these guys battling. But after a while, things slowly started to calm down. And the guy ahead, who I believe is Ferrari Fearless at this time, or maybe it's MJ Povey, he ended up catching up to the guys ahead, whereas Caesar and Ewan continued battling, and Caesar wasn't having a great time. As you can see at this moment in time, he's losing the rear pretty much in every corner. He's locking up going into every corner. So I thought if I can get past him now, then obviously with me being a little bit more confident with the car, I could definitely, you know, at least try and battle with Ewan. But we can see we make a big mistake, and that allows Caesar to get back ahead of us. So now we have to follow Caesar, and one thing I will say is that following cars with this car is a little bit more difficult because there isn't as much aerodynamic advancements with this car. So the downforce of this car is a lot less than the usual F1 2020 cars. So following cars is pretty difficult. But as we move on to lap 5 now, you can see Caesar managed to pass Ewan because Ewan was really struggling. As you can see, he's got a 3-second time penalty. And then as you saw from the last corner, he made a pretty big mistake on the exit, which allowed us to get past him. So now we're just trying to keep up with Caesar as much as we can and just try and follow him as best as we can, because as I said, the downforce is not as good as the more current cars. So when you are following another car pretty closely, it is a lot more difficult, especially since the braking zones and stuff like that is a little bit different as well. But either way, you know, if we can be as close to Caesar as possible, then we can definitely think about going for an undercut once we actually decide to go into the pits. And that's exactly what we end up doing, just sticking as close to him as we possibly can and just trying to basically force him into a mistake through the pressure of being so close to him. But as we come up to the final corner now of lap 6, you can see that Leopard ends up doing a 1 minute 1.4, so that was sort of the pace at the time. And we just couldn't really keep up with that. We were a few tenths slower, which was, you know, obviously going to happen since Leopard was quicker than us. But moving on to lap 12, you can see I finally decided to go into the pits and try and get as big as an undercut on Caesar as possible. I thought that he was going to cover the undercut on the next lap, so we'll see if he does that. And yeah, the one thing about pitting with the classic cars is you don't actually know who your teammate is because everyone else is using the same car. So, you know, you could end up going into the pits and end up getting held quite easily because you end up pitting with your teammate without realizing it. So that was a little bit of a risk, but we decided to take it anyway. And now we're in P11 behind FRA Fearless and JD as well, who was, I think he pitted quite a while back because he was actually struggling on his tyres quite a lot. So as we move on to lap 15 now, you can see Caesar finally comes into the pits and we actually get a pretty big undercut. Considering how short this track is, we ended up with a 2-second undercut, which was massive. And I definitely wanted to take advantage of that, and I didn't want to let Caesar get past me, especially since Ewan was also ahead of him. So I was definitely going to use Ewan as sort of a buffer, and he had that 3-second time penalty. So if needed, really, I could have just let him pass and followed him as closely as I could. As long as I was within 3 seconds of him, then I was fine. But I didn't even want to let him pass, because if I let him pass and I made a mistake, then I could easily have just let him slip through my grasps and we would lose that position to him. So I just wanted to try and keep my head down and just drive as well as I can, which I have to say, we were actually driving pretty well with this car, a lot better than I was expecting. We didn't do a lot of practice. I was actually going to go into this without doing any practice, but once I heard that he was actually going to be allowed to use setups, I decided that I was going to do at least a little bit of practice and try and get used to a setup so that we could, you know, perform as good as we can in this sort of race, which I have to say, as I said, we performed a lot better, or should I say we're performing a lot better than I thought I was going to. I didn't think I was really going to be fighting for a top 10 position because of the type of people in this lobby, but we are. I mean, we're in P6 right now, and you can see the consistency going on right about now as we're just putting in lap after lap of roughly the same time within a few tenths of each other. And as we come up to lap 24 now, this was actually our quickest lap of the race. So I'm going to talk over it, and just so you guys, if you're interested on how to take this track in a classic car, then obviously you can listen to this and hopefully it helps you improve your time. So as you come up to turn 1, you want to brake just after the curb starts, down into second gear, then short shift up to third just to really keep the rear from slipping out under you. And then for turn 3, just after the black line on the road, pretty hard to see, but if you get used to it, you'll be able to sort of memorize where it is. You want to apply about 50% of the brake and just trail brake into that corner. And then for this corner, you want to brake in between the 100 and the 50 meter board, roughly about 80 meters, and then just try and get the traction down as soon as you can. It is pretty hard, even with the extra sort of traction that you get with this car. And then for this corner, it is pretty difficult. You have to trail brake into it, try and hit the apex as best as you can. We managed to do that, and we managed to get a pretty decent exit coming up to the final corner as well. And then for the final corner, you want to brake at the 100 meter board down into 4th gear, and once again just try to get the best traction that you can, which we do. And as we cross the line, we do a 1 minute 0.8, which was, I believe, a few tenths off of where the fastest lap was, which at the time I believe was held by Ronhaar, who did a 1 minute 0.5. So right now we're only a few tenths slower than the actual leaders of this race, so we're doing pretty well. And as we come up to turn 3, you can see there's a yellow flag coming up right about now, and that's actually because TRO Limitless has spun, so we've actually gotten a free position from JD because of that spin, and he was really struggling on his tires. I don't know if it was due to his setup or what. He said it was because of the 11 ballast, but I was also using 11 ballast for this setup, so I don't think it was that. So yeah, I don't know what it was, but he was just struggling with his tires a lot, and it cost him in the end because he ended up spinning. So we get a free position from him, and now we're setting our sights on Ferrari Fearless, because as you can see, he's actually got a 3-second time penalty. So at this point, I wanted to try and get as close to him as possible so that we can gain another position off of his 3-second time penalty, because we only had 1 warning at this point, which for me, as you guys know, is pretty good considering I get penalties left, right and center when it comes to these sort of races. But as we come up to the final lap now, we are only 3.3 seconds behind Fearless. So all we need is a pretty good lap, say an 8 out of 10 lap really, and for him to do a little bit of a mess up where, you know, maybe he gets a bad exit or something like that, and then we can gain the position off of him. So coming up to turn 3, we take that pretty nicely, but we just don't get the exit that we were looking for. And as you can see, we're losing time now to Ferrari Fearless, so we're about 3.5 seconds behind him. So we're going to need to have a pretty solid sector 2 if we really want to get this position from him. And MJ is probably going to get the position off of him because we're only 3.5 seconds off of him, whereas MJ is almost a second in front of us. So he's within that 3 seconds, so we want to try and get within that 3 seconds as well. But as we come up to the final corner, which is pretty much the only corner in sector 3, you can see we're not really going to do it. To gain 5 tenths in a single corner is not really possible, especially on a track like this. But as we cross the line in P5, LCR Leopard ends up winning the whole thing. I think he ended up on the final lap getting away from Ronhaar. So those two had a pretty close battle the entire time. But we ended up in P5, which was a position I was not expecting to happen in a race like this with the caliber of drivers in this as well. So I was really happy with this performance. And we actually did another race as well. We did it in the Red Bull 2010 cars at Brazil, so if you want to see that one as well, then let me know in the comment section and I will make a separate video on that. But that's going to be it for today's video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to hit the like button, as it lets me know that you're enjoying the content, and it lets YouTube know that you're enjoying the content, and will help push it out to more people. And also, if you're new to the channel and you're still watching by this point, stick around by subscribing, because this is the type of content I will be uploading fairly regularly in the future, as sort of league racing and stuff sort of dies down slowly as we get towards the new game coming out towards the middle of the year. So I'll see you guys in the next video.